and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am so happy to be with you, bringing you an author interview today. As we get started, I do want to remind you, as I always do, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. Really does help the algorithm, helps get the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. If you are interested and would like to help the podcast in another way, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave a tip or a donation that goes to not only this podcast, but to the network as a whole. It is greatly appreciated, and the support you give makes this podcast work. It makes this podcast able to exist. So thank you for all of your support, whatever form that support takes. But if you are interested in helping in a financial way, you can go to gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, thank you so very much for everything you do to help support this podcast. How is your, weekend in this case? It is a Saturday. I don't usually post on a Saturday, but this past week has been not exactly crazy. I don't know what this past week has been. It's been a little bizarre in a lot of different ways, and it's pushed back my getting this episode out. So I apologize for that, but I am happy to be here for that. It is a beautiful sunny day outside today. We've had a couple of really beautiful sunny days. Flowers are blooming, walks are happening, and I am enjoying the spring. Continue to not enjoy my allergies, but I've had allergies for decades, so what else is new? I am pretty well used to them at this point, but definitely enjoying the sunny weather. Beautiful temperatures, not too hot, not really cold. Even at night, it's starting to be warm enough that I can walk comfortably without long sleeves with the dogs. So I enjoy that. The dogs seem to enjoy that. We have a good walk. But this past week was, like I said, just a little strange in terms of schedule and illness and various other things. My hubby hasn't been feeling well this past week, and I've had allergies causing me to sneeze my head off in the middle of lessons as usual. Thankfully, my students, at least the children, often think it's funny. I don't know why sneezing is funny to children, but it is sometimes. And I continue to enjoy my classes, enjoy my students, enjoy hearing all about their lives and their stories. And they live in so many different and varied places, and they're all different ages. And I just enjoy the heck out of it. So I can't complain about that. But we are, of course, here to talk about a book, and this week I am speaking with author Janet Burroway about her book, Simone in Pieces. Let me go ahead and give you the description of this book. Readers first meet Simone Lerrante, a Belgian war orphan, as a child refugee in Sussex, England, her memory damaged by trauma. This novel offers a kaleidoscopic vision of her fractured life and piecemeal understanding of self across multiple points of view. Following her from Cambridge to New York City and across the United States, through a disastrous marriage, thwarted desire, and the purgatory of academic backwaters, the novel charts Simone's unexpected reconnection with her past, which provides both autonomy and inspiration for her future. Janet Burroway slowly reveals a multifaceted, fascinating protagonist who observes her own life without always allowing herself to be immersed in it. Spanning 7 decades, this story is both epic and contained, rewarding readers at every turn. And there you get this overview of Simone in Pieces, that last sentence, spanning 7 decades. This really does span an incredible amount of time in Simone's life. And we get Simone's life in pieces, as she does. She has very little memory before her arrival as a refugee in England during World War II. And she slowly starts getting some of those pieces back. We as the readers also get some of those pieces as well, And this is told, as you saw or heard, from multiple points of view. So we hear from Simone and we find out how she's interacting with people in her life. But then there are scenes from different points of view, and not just her husband's point of view, or the family that she's living with when she is a refugee or when she is working for a family in England. We hear from there's a point of view from a man we meet at a gas station when she and her husband are driving on their honeymoon. There is a neighbor, we hear his point of view, and it gives you different insights into her life. As you said, as you heard in that description, a life that she doesn't always feel particularly immersed in or connected to because of the nature of her past and her lack of memory thereof. She doesn't always feel that present or grounded in her own life. But as she goes through these 7 decades and she has all of these experiences that start building upon each other and she starts getting pieces of herself back, then you start feeling like maybe she's a little bit more connected. But to get these different points of view is a really interesting way to present a character, because you are getting so many different time frames, so many different places, so many different viewpoints, and it really is like it said, a kaleidoscope. When you first look at it, it seems kind of fractured, right? And then the more you look, the more you see, and maybe things start coming together. Are there pictures in there? Are you seeing shapes? What are you seeing within that kaleidoscope? And this was, I thought, a really interesting way to develop and present a character for us as the reader to find out more about Simone, not always from her point of view. It would have been a very different story if it had just been told from her point of view as she's going through life, as she's getting her memory back. That would have been a good story as well, but this is just a very different way of presenting that story, and one that I found really intriguing. And it was fascinating for me to not only read it, but think about how Janet went about putting these pieces together and deciding what points of view to include and what perspective each of those points of view might bring to Simone's life and her character throughout the book. So really fascinating. But let's go ahead and let Janet talk about the writing of the book and the inspiration for the story, etc. Again, the book is called Simone in Pieces. The author is Janet Burroway. Hi, Janet. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah.
I
My
am happy to have you today, and I'm excited to talk about your book, Simone in Pieces. Before we do that, though, if you would take just a moment to introduce yourself to my listeners, that would be great.
Okay. It's hard to know where to start, so I'll start at the beginning.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
uh, I was born in Arizona, and I was born in Tucson, raised in Phoenix. And by the time I was 8 years old, I knew I the desert was not my home. I
Mm,
wanted to get to cities and trees, and our vacations had showed us tr cities and trees. And so when I was 18, I managed to get to New York and it did my undergraduate degree there. And then since then, I've sort of lived all over the world. And the truth is, I have never found where my home is.
mm.
I'm very happy to be in Chicago now. It's a wonderful city. And that, I guess, is where I'm ending up. But in the meantime, I've lived many places. In relation to the book, Simone in Pieces, I've lived many places that Simone lives, but she also lives places that I've never lived.
Okay. Okay. So you've traveled a lot then and lived in many different places. I would imagine that you find something in each place that kind of resonates with you, but
I
maybe it's
do.
not
I
the
do.
perfect place.
I do. And when I have settled in a place, I have been guilty of nostalgia for the last place. You know,
Okay.
in Chicago, what I miss is my Tallahassee pool.
Yes.
Just being able to walk out and get in the water.
Yes. Especially probably in December or January.
Yeah, well, in December or January in Tallahassee, you can't go in the pool anyway. So,
Okay. Okay. So give an overview of the story for Simone in Pieces.
Simone is a refugee from the Second World War. As a child, she is rescued from the coast of Belgium in the first chapter. But the rescue is so traumatic in ways that the reader doesn't, in the ways that Simone doesn't remember and the reader doesn't find out for a long time. So traumatic that she loses most of her childhood memory.
Mm-hmm.
And because she can't really remember her childhood, she doesn't really know who she is. She has little scraps of fact and image that she can hang on to, but it's not much. And so the course of the book is Simone learning how to put together a self for herself,
Yeah.
out of the encounters that she has with other people. So really, she is, and I guess as I wrote the book, it was kind of, shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was a revelation to me that all of us create ourselves by our encounters with other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we are, is who
Yeah.
we have chosen to be, whom we have coincidentally run into, what this accident and that deliberate choice, the people in our lives are who we are.
Yeah. Who we present ourselves to them as, how they perceive us or change us through those encounters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what was
And
your
some of
initial?
those are profound changes, and some of them are very slight. Sometimes we affect other people more than they affect us. How
Mhm.
many times has it happened in your life that you said to an old friend, remember the time you told me blah, 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 and they don't remember it at all. And it
Yep.
has been crucial to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think, how can we have such different memories of the same thing?
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you ever have that experience that Janet was just talking about in terms of you remember something one way and maybe really intensely, and then you talk to another person who was in that same memory, a family member, a friend, what have you, and they're like, oh, yeah, I kind of remember that day. And you have placed so much importance on it. Maybe it's even a core memory for you, and the other person has a completely different memory or experience of that event. I think memory is so fascinating, which is part of what makes Simone's story so fascinating and how we explore that story because she is encountering other people, as I said before, different points of view. So, a really interesting way to put this story together. But we're going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, what even inspired Simone and her story? You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Janet Burroway. This is your second and final reminder as we go into segment 2 that you can support the podcast and the network as a whole by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave a donation, however you want to describe that. It helps this podcast, it helps the whole network. It gets this podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. As always, your support is very much appreciated. Before the break, Janet was talking about encounters and how this book is made up of encounters and how those encounters are experienced differently by each person within those encounters or within that memory. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Janet. What was your initial inspiration for the story?
It was very odd, unlike anything else. In the late 1990s, I wrote a short story that was meant to be a satire of an English department meeting.
Okay.
And it was kind of acid and very funny. I had a great time, for instance, making up the names of all the characters so that each one of them could be heard as a kind of criticism. Like there's a dean whose name is Riddick, and his nickname is Nuke. So he's a new critic. And there's a Harriet Rowe Glaucia, whose nickname is Hetty, so she's Hetty Glaucia. But there were dozens or a dozen of those. And it was narrated by this very old person based on somebody in my department at Florida State, who had been there since it was a women's college and had been passed over and over again by the gentlemen professors. And so she was kind of acid and funny. And all of a sudden, this short story took a hard turn into grief in her memory. And I like it when my characters turn on me and show me a side of themselves that I didn't know they had.
Yeah.
But this was extreme. And I realized that I could not write that story finish the story until I had worked out her life. So I sat down one night at midnight. In those days, I could start writing at midnight. And I just plotted out her life, what had happened from the time she was rescued from the coast of Belgium during the Second World War until the present. And I woke my husband up about 5 o'clock in the morning and said, listen to this, I've got her whole life. And he listened to it and said, that's your next novel. Well, I was already writing a different novel, and I had obligations in updating the craft books and an essay collection I'd promised. It just off and off and off. I couldn't get to it. And then we also suffered a major family tragedy that took many years to deal with before I was able to get back to writing about. But oddly enough, I did keep coming back to Simone's story. It did hold on to me in such a way that I would come back and write on it and then put it away again.
Yeah.
So over the course of many decades, 2 decades.
Yeah. We get Simone's life in bits and pieces, kind of
Yes.
the way she gets her memory back, but we don't always get it from her perspective. So we get it from other people as well. Can you talk about the process of writing in this way, and were there challenges?
The first challenge was that I didn't know that's what I was doing and resisted it. So it had to keep telling me, no, this is not Simone talking. This is somebody else's point of view. The first time I sat down knowing that I was going to try to write a novel of this, I was thinking about Simone being on the boat as a little girl being taken from Belgium to England. And I wrote it in such a way that my conceit was that she was always partly on the boat, that her mind never left that boat. And it was really bad. It was mawkish, and it didn't work, and it didn't work. And I wrote it over and over and over again. I have a thick file of attempts to write it that way. And then it occurred to me, this can't be from her point of view because she doesn't remember this. She's just gone through a traumatic rescue and she doesn't remember it. So I already had the woman who was holding her in a blanket. So I started putting it in that woman's voice. And that helped because it was a working class voice.
Yeah.
And it felt better. And also I started asking, why is she telling us this? To whom is she telling this story? And those two things Simone can't remember it, and to whom is she telling this story, kind of got me started on a possible plot. And ultimately that became the plot. But over and over again, I would go back to it thinking I'll write this from Simone's point of view, and it ended up not being her point of view. Some other voice came to me and needed to be told.
Yeah.
In that.
Which goes back to exactly what we were talking about at the beginning of those encounters that you have, because we then see Simone through so many different lenses.
Right.
And it's her memory is fractured, our image of her is fractured. Those pieces slowly start to come back together for both Simone and the reader.
It's one of the constants for me that I don't really know I never knew what I'm doing when I start, and I don't know what I'm doing until I see a kind of overarching metaphor that tells the story, but also the imagery. And the idea of things in pieces, mosaics and stained glass windows and puzzles and montages and all kinds of things that are put together. On almost every page, there's some little thing that has to be a piece of something else, something large.
Since Simone is the main character and we do get her perspective, what about her do you think will resonate with readers?
What I hope is the sense that we create ourselves with our encounters with other people. What I hope is, sometimes you come to a place and you start hearing about somebody and you get somebody's perspective, and then somebody else tells you somebody, and this person adores them and that person doesn't like them. And you get a kind of image of this person, and then you get to know the person. And if you continue a friendship, you get to know them better and better and better. And that's kind of my image of the book now, that you're getting other people's foretaste of what she's like, but then you get to know her, and finally you're friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And then finally you're friends. I like how Janet said, and then finally you're friends, which you understand that, sometimes you meet people and maybe you're friendly, maybe you're not sure what you think of them, maybe you even have a negative first reaction, and then your relationship develops and things happen and conversations happen and bits and pieces of your life get shared, and then finally you're friends. Same thing with how we experience Simone in this. We meet her, maybe you'll have an opinion of her, maybe you're confused by what's going on because of the piecemeal nature of her getting her memory and her story, her memory back and her story given to you. And then maybe you're like, oh, suddenly I have this whole picture and now we're friends. I just think that's such a wonderful way of looking at this story. But we're going to go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about character development and how Janet does that. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Janet Burroway. Before the break, I was actually trying to read my notes. I couldn't read my own handwriting, and I meant to say that you might have noticed that Janet's video froze just a little bit right at the end of her answer. She actually completed the answer, but she did freeze there in that video, and I had written a note to mention that, and then of course I couldn't read my own handwriting. So there you have it. But before the break, before she froze, she was talking about how Simone's life gets revealed to us as the reader and to Simone herself. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Janet. In terms of character development, how much do you like to do before you start writing? And it sounds like you like to kind of find out your characters as you write, but is there a combination of both?
Yes. Yes. As I say, I like it when my characters surprise me, and I do keep finding things out about them. Certainly about Simone, there were a lot of things that I had to learn about her. Um, I do have some tricks when I feel I need to get to know this person better. I play little games with myself, you know.
Mm,
Here's just a list of images that feel like they belong to this person. Um, what is she most afraid of? And I'll try to answer that question, you know. What would be her ideal, whatever, you know? So I play little games in my journal, but there comes a point that I feel a deeper connection, if I'm lucky, with
hmm
that character. And it's then that the character is likely to let me know things that I would not have known if the character didn't speak up for me.
hmm
I'm talking as if this is uh, voodoo, but it is the imaginative process, I think.
hmm
One of the things that is difficult about a writer's life, and certainly a wife, mother writer's life, is that it takes a lot of energy to get out of this world into that one. It's just really hard to leave reality and go into the reality of the fictional scene.
hmm
Also, really hard to get out again once you're,
Yeah.
you procrastinate, and I have a habit of cleaning up everything before I sit down to work. And I thought that was procrastination till my husband said that's your ritual. That's how
hmm
you get yourself to this to the uh, but then I don't want to get out and make dinner or,
Right.
feed the
Right.
cat. I'm in here. So it's hard both ways.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Especially when you're in that moment and then the whatever
Something.
it is, and you're like, no, that is much less interesting than what's going on here.
That's right.
Simone, in many ways, in some ways, doesn't have choice in certain circumstances. She's a refugee, she's placed with a family. There's certain things she doesn't have a choice. So do you see her character as shaped more by circumstance or choice?
That's a very interesting question. Certainly at the beginning, more by circumstance. I mean, in the first chapter, there's a young soldier who realizes that there are two kinds of people in the world, those who will go home after this war and those who won't. And
Mm,
in that sense, everyone in at least the Western world is without a choice. You
yeah.
know, it's, or you can make a choice, but really this war has determined the basis of your life.
hmm
And Simone is determined that she's not going back there, but eventually she must in order to find her full self because part of her was left back there.
Yeah.
So um, I think up to a certain point, she's pretty much shaped by circumstance. And then I do think there's a point that it changes a little bit, and that is when she is tricked at college by a young man in a really ugly way.
hmm
And then he tries to apologize by sending her roses, and she slits the heads of all the roses off.
Yeah.
And I think I will not stand for this, you know.
Yeah.
That's a point at which she takes hold and says, I'm going to run my own life.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not that easy. And the
Right.
next time she tries to run her own life, she makes a terrible mistake.
Well, isn't that the same for all of us?
For all of us,
So,
indeed.
yeah. Um, we get bits and pieces, of course, gradually. So what was that process for you to decide what to reveal when?
Okay, that was very piecemeal. Um, I said that it gave me the hint of a plot, the fact that she didn't remember, and the fact that the woman told the story. And I didn't see for a long time how those two things came together. And when I did see it, I thought, that's climactic. That helps me to find a shape of plot in this piecemeal that I'm doing here. But again, I wrote all that from Simone's point of view, and it did not work.
Yeah.
And then I lit on this other, Hetty's voice started talking to me about what happened, and it made. I think that this is maybe giving secrets away, but when you have a coincidence in a novel, you're always terrified that it's going to look like, that's too easy.
Yeah.
But this one is really, the groundwork is really laid for it very early on and continuingly. And I also kind of speculate about coincidence. It happens that a friend who writes, a linguist who writes about such things, it turns out that she's writing a popular but linguistic book about coincidence. And this is an accident. One of those, it's a coincidence that she's writing about coincidence. And I asked her if you sit next to your cousin that you've never met at a dinner party, but you never know, you don't talk to him, and you never know it's your cousin, is that a coincidence? And she said, no. There is a science of coincidence, and that is not a coincidence. You have to know.
Right.
In order for it to be called a coincidence. So I've got both kinds of coincidence wrapped up in this. I think I strayed far from your question.
That's okay, because now I'm thinking about the coincidence that's not a coincidence. It's an interesting
Yeah, it is an interesting
cycle to think about. Is that a coincidence? Have you ever thought about the science of coincidence? I actually, once I heard what Janet was saying that she learned, makes sense to me, but I'm not sure I've ever thought about the science of coincidence or exactly what specifically makes up a coincidence. But it makes a lot of sense what she was just saying, that it's not a coincidence if you don't realize it's a coincidence. But I love that. That's why I love talking to people, because I get to learn lots of new things that maybe I haven't thought of before. And thank goodness we're not relying on me to think of everything, because it wouldn't happen. So I get to hear about these things from lots of different people. Let's go ahead and take our third break of this episode. When we come back, were there more perspectives that did not make it into the story? You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Janet Burroway. Before the break, Janet was talking about the science of coincidences and how there are both kinds of coincidence in this story, the ones that people know about and the ones that they don't know about. So are those actually coincidence? That's what she was talking about in terms of the science. But let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Janet. So were there perspectives that you didn't include? Like there's small perspectives from other people. Were there ones that you wrote but then decided they didn't fit the narrative?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Many. There are outtakes from Simone presented as short stories in little magazines all over the place.
Oh, cool.
They're
Oh, it's
really
like a treasure hunt.
good. Yeah.
Love that.
One of them is the best story I ever wrote, but it just doesn't fit in the novel. So,
Okay. Yeah. This takes place over decades, so that's a challenge in itself. But what was the research like for the book?
there were all kinds of research. The most deliberate was that at one point I realized, let me back up and say, there are three immigrants from Europe in this novel, and two of them are Hungarian and one of them is Belgium. And I felt that I could write about those people because I've been married to both a Belgian refugee and a Hungarian refugee. And what I know about their experience, I know mainly from my mothers-in-law, who were very warm and giving about their, long before I knew I was going to make any use of this as a writer. They were very moving about the experience of leaving everything
Yeah.
and coming to a different country. And so one of the things I was married to someone from Flanders, and I spoke French with my mother-in-law. And my French was pretty good, but my Flemish was terrible. So when I decided on Simone, I thought she must come from the French-speaking part of Belgium, which I didn't really know. So at one point, fairly early in the process, I just took the Eurostar across the channel and went to Liège and spent 4 days in Liège walking up and down. I chose the building where she had lived as a child and made notes on the window, the stained glass window in it. I picked her school as a little girl. I shopped at the market. I just went to the museum, and the street I picked that she had lived on was a quay along the river, was called K. Roosevelt. And I thought, this cannot have been the name during the Second World War when she lived there. So I went to the library, and a librarian and I managed to communicate well enough that she found me an old map, and we found that it had been called the Quai des États-Unis. So it was the American K.
Right.
So I loved that. She
Yeah.
lived in America all her life.
Yep. It was.
Coincidence.
Yep. She was destined. Like it was pointing her in that direction. That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. What draws you to writing historical fiction?
Well, I don't think I'm any more drawn to writing historical fiction than other kinds. I'm told that I wrote a speculative novel, though it wasn't called that in those days, and I didn't know that's what it was. But it was written 5 years in the future about American politics. This is just, I think, the second historical novel I've written. Usually my stories are contemporary.
Okay.
I have begun to understand that one thing that runs through short stories and novels for me is the image of the woman who was raised in the 50s and then hit the 60s and had to make the transition from that very confined, clear path for her to feminism. It was terribly difficult for all of us, terribly difficult. I mean, part of it was wanting to be allowed to write, and part of it was discovering that it seemed as if marriage and writing went together perfectly. But Sylvia Plath and I can tell you that is not the case.
Right.
And so that was a ferociously difficult passage that we went through, my generation. And I do keep coming back to it. I didn't realize I had until I started looking at a collection of short stories and seeing that came up over and over again. Can I make this leap to being a feminist? Well, not yet.
Right.
Not yet.
And that's one very interesting part about Simone's character, is that we see her in different decades, and what is she doing and how is she reacting to the world around her, and how does her status as an immigrant, a war refugee, all of those things affect how she sees what's going on in the world around her.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. For one thing, at one point, she quotes Virginia Woolf as saying that women should be indifferent to war. And she tries to be indifferent to the Vietnam War, but it comes to her doorstep, you know, and then she doesn't know what to do about it.
Yeah. It makes a great quote, but it doesn't always work in actuality.
A lot of things, that's true.
Yeah. Are you working on anything new currently?
I'm doing a memoir, and I'm not trying to make a book. I'm just flashing down memories. I've got a manuscript divided into all the places I've lived, so I know when a memory comes to me, I know where it belongs, roughly. And I flash it down. And at the moment, I'm not trying to make anything. I'm just trying to remember.
Okay.
And if it turns out being a great monster of nothing for my grandchildren, okay. And if at some point there seems to be a book in it, then I will make another memoir. I've only written one memoir, and it's I'm going to be 90 this year. It's probably time for one.
There's a lot of life to remember.
There is.
Yeah. Even if you don't publish it, can I be adopted as a family member and read it? Because I feel like there's a lot of fascinating life in there to read about, just from what I've learned so far.
It won't be secret. It won't be secret. It's just...
Okay, I probably shouldn't just invite myself to be invited into other people's, to be adopted into other people's families, but I would love to have more conversations with Janet about her life, because it sounds like there's a lot of stories and a lot of interesting experiences. And if this memoir comes out, I will be happy to read it. And if it doesn't come out, then maybe I could be adopted and still hear those stories. But let's go ahead and take our final break of this episode. When we come back, Janet's path to writing. Was it something she always wanted to do? How did it come about, etc.? You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with author Janet Burroway. Before the break, we were talking about her memoir in progress and that she is currently working on it, might finish it, might not. I blatantly asked to be adopted into the family, etc. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Janet. Is writing something that you've always wanted to do? It sounds like you've done it for a long time, but is it something you always wanted to do, or how did you come to write for publication?
Yeah, I really have always wanted to do it. My mother used to take me to the library twice a week, and I would sort of ambitiously collect. I'd read this many books this week, ambitious little thing. And I was 5 when I wrote my first poem, and my mother was very strict and not 100% wonderful mother, but she was very good about writing. She believed in inspiration, and if I suddenly wanted to write a poem at midnight, well, that's when inspiration struck, and you couldn't do anything about it. And so I wrote a lot of poems at midnight.
I was gonna say, good loophole.
Yeah, it's great. And so by the time I was in the 7th grade, I had a little collection of poems. Embarrassing, just embarrassing poetry. But I learned to rhyme, and I learned. My mother was an elocution teacher, and so she taught me lots of little pieces, so I had things to copy. Then when I was a teenager, I suddenly wanted to act, and I wanted to dress design. And so then through my teenage years, I wasn't at all sure I wanted to write. These other two things seemed more glamorous to me. But that didn't last.
Yeah.
I did, those things I have managed in various ways to exercise over the years. I did some costume designing in England and in Belgium, and enjoyed that enormously. And I've also written plays, and that takes care of. I actually rather look at the play I've written than be in one. So.
Well, but it's something to learn about yourself. You thought that seemed like the right choice, and then maybe not so much.
Maybe not so much. Yeah.
And you get to write. Simone does have some acting in her story, so maybe you're not doing the acting, but you can still incorporate it in ways.
Yeah.
Do you have advice for aspiring authors?
Keep at it. Keep at it. Keep at it. There are two great things about being a writer, and one of them is that it's there for you when you need it. When tragedy strikes in your life, and it will, some way or other, the outlet of a journal or just your computer, the ability to put it all down, is comforting. That's one thing. And the other thing is you can keep doing it forever. Unlike being a basketball star or a female actress in the American theater, you can keep doing it forever, and at the highest level that you can reach. So that's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
As I say, I'll be 90 this year, and I look forward to getting back to the page. I've been not doing that. I've not been writing for about a couple of months now while I've been touring with Simone and so forth. And I enjoy that enormously, but I'm ready to get back to the page.
Yeah. That's good though, because if you weren't ready to get back, that says something as well.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. But obviously you're a reader, since you were just talking about the library trips. With a life as full as yours, asking you to choose a favorite seems mean, but who are some of your go-to authors?
You might be surprised at how old-fashioned I am about it, but Jane Austen, George Eliot, Joseph Conrad. I went through a period of intense copying, actually, the style of Henry James, but I'm way over that. And it had a hang up in my writing because I write too much. And now I have to realize that the computer makes it so easy to write too much that I have to be very disciplined about cutting that, cut and cut and cut.
Yeah.
Anyway, who else? Of contemporaries, of course, I'm a continuing fan of Alice Munro, and certainly of Margaret Atwood, uh, whom I think is a great writer. Uh, I'll leave it at that. I think she's a great writer. Hernan Diaz, uh, Ian McEwan. I've always admired Ian McEwan from The Child in Time, and I think his new novel, What We Can Know, is very interesting. Um, uh, who can I tell you? Han Kang. I guess that's what comes to mind off the top of my head.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
might be different tomorrow afternoon.
That's perfectly reasonable. Okay, so if people want to know more about you and your books, website if you have one, and any social media that you're active on.
I'm active on Facebook, and my website is www.janetburroway.com, www.janetburroway.com. The website has all kinds of links to various books. There are 20 books, I think, in there, and interviews and extraneous stuff about the past. There are also a couple of wonderful symphonies written to my children's books, The Truck on the Track, The Giant Jam Sandwich, and The Perfect Pig. And those are by composer Philip Wharton. And he continues to put my poetry and my children's books to music, which is a great pleasure.
Oh, wonderful. I'm going to check that out. That sounds amazing. Janet, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure we highlighted during this time?
I don't think so. I think you've been very thorough, and it was a pleasure.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me about Simone in Pieces and writing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. Me too.
Thank you once again to Janet for joining me to talk about Simone in Pieces, the writing of it, the really interesting way that it is put together. If you are a fan of historical fiction, especially historical fiction that spans multiple decades, you're going to get glimpses of life in multiple different decades and the life of Simone as a woman in those decades, which is always an interesting lens. Then this is definitely a book that you will want to check out. If you're interested in books that are written from multiple points of view, but maybe not in a way that you have experienced before, because this is not multiple points of view from several main characters. This is multiple points of view from people that you maybe don't hear from again, but you get a glimpse, a snapshot into Simone's life at a certain point in her life, and then it moves on to the next glimpse, the next snapshot, the next piece of that puzzle of Simone's life being put back together as she lives her life, but also as she begins to regain pieces of her memory. I know I keep saying it, but it's a really interesting way to structure a book and structure the development of a character and how we get that character's story arc. So definitely check this out if this is something that sounds appealing to you. I hope, of course, that you will join me for my next episode also historical fiction, this time the 1920s. I will be speaking with Melora Fern about her debut novel. It's called Whistling Women and Crowing Hens. It tells the story of a young woman that you see on the book cover named Birdie, who has a rather overbearing older sister, and Birdie at 19 would like to have a life of her own, and so she auditions and is accepted into the Chautauqua circuit, which is a traveling group of musicians, and she's a musician, and so she starts traveling for the summer with this group of musicians, and it's a coming of age story and her experiences. She has a lot of different experiences, meets a lot of people, begins to see parts of the world and has experiences that she never would have had. Just really watching her grow as a character, and lots of very interesting historical stuff. Let's go with historical stuff, historical things that I was not aware of. So I got to learn about from this book and this conversation with Melora, who I spoke with earlier today, actually. So I had a good conversation with her. That will be the next episode, and hopefully you will join me for that. In the meantime, as always, if you are a fan of this podcast and would do me the great honor of leaving a review, it would be greatly appreciated. Reviews help to get the podcast out into the algorithm, into the world, so more readers can find and experience these interviews and maybe learn about books and authors that they did not know before. You can also please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. And of course, if you're on social media and would like to follow the podcast, you can do so on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Love hearing from you, so please come find the podcast and hit me up with all of your burning book questions/comments. I hope that you are having a wonderful weekend so far, that you are experiencing some good weather, that you're doing something relaxing or productive, or whatever your weekend needs to be. Maybe it's a combination thereof. But regardless of what's going on in your weekend, my wish for you is the same that it is every episode, and that is that you have plenty of time somewhere in your life to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.